Okay, class, in this lesson, I'm going to show you another method for solving quadratic equations, and this method is called completing the square. Okay, the best way to explain this is just by showing you with an example. So let's go ahead and start with the following. X squared plus 10x, and then plus some constant c. Okay. Now, the focal point here is going to be the middle term. We're basically going to take this coefficient, in this case it's 10, we're going to divide it by 2, and then square the result. Okay, and that becomes our constant. So let me show you. We're going to take 10, and then we're going to divide it by 2, and that gives us 5. Okay, then we're going to take that 5, and we're going to square it, and we get 25. Okay. So then this 25 gets substituted into this constant. So rewriting this equation, we get x squared plus 10x plus 25. Okay? And that, in essence, is completing the square. Very straightforward, very simple. All right, so let's go ahead and do another example just to make sure you understood that. Here's another one. We have x squared plus 5x plus c. Okay, again, we're going to focus on this 5. This is the coefficient of the middle term. Again, we're going to take the 5, we're going to divide it by 2, okay, and then we're going to square that result and then substitute that back into our equation or into our quadratic for c. All right, so we're going to take 5 and we're going to divide it by 2, okay. We're going to leave it as an improper fraction, 5 over 2. Okay, so we're going to take that and we're going to square this whole thing. Okay, 5 halves squared is the same thing as 5 squared over 2 squared. And then the result is 25 over 4. Okay, so we're going to take this 25 over 4 and plug that back into c. And we would rewrite this as x squared plus 5x plus 25 over 4. Okay? Hopefully that made perfect sense to you, and I hope that you recognize that this is very, very straightforward. Now, this is part of a larger picture, or at least this is one step of a larger piece, and let me show you what I mean by that. So now we're going to have a quadratic function as an equation. Okay, we have x squared plus 4x minus 10 is equal to 0. Okay, to be able to apply the completing the square method, the first thing we need to do is to move this negative 10 to the other side of the equation. Okay, now think about how do we do that? If this is negative 10, to move it to this side, we have to add 10 to both sides. And when we do, we get x squared plus 4x is equal to 10. Okay? Now we can use the completing the square method. Okay? So I'm going to do this off to the side. We're going to find this term. Okay? This is the middle term. I'm going to take the 4 and we're going to divide it by 2. That's the first thing we do. Divide it by 2 and we get 2. Okay, then we're going to take that result, which is 2, and we're going to square it, and we get 4. Okay, now that we have 4, we're going to put that back into this equation. But remember, when we add that to this side of the equation, we have to do the same thing to this side. So in other words, if we were to rewrite this, we get x squared plus 4x plus 4 is equal to 10 plus 4. Okay? See this? We have a 4 on this side and we have a 4 on this side. You can't just throw this number into the equation and keep the equation balanced. Whatever you do to one side of the equation, you have to do the same thing to the other side of the equation. Okay, so rewriting this, we get x squared plus 4x plus 4 is equal to 14. Okay, now take a look at this. X squared plus 4x plus 4. you should be able to recognize that this is a perfect square trinomial. Okay? In other words, this is really x plus 2 times x plus 2. And if you want to test this out, you can FOIL this. Okay, if you FOIL this, right, f, first term, outer term, inner term, last term, if you multiply that out, you'll get this. Okay, now moving forward, this now becomes x plus 2 quantity squared, right, because x plus 2 times x plus 2 is x plus 2 squared. We're going to set this equal to 14. Okay, now we can do the square root method. We're going to take the square root of this side and square root of this side. Okay, now when we do that, let me move this equation sign a little bit over here. So when we take the square root over here, okay, remember you have to do plus or minus. Let me make that a little clearer. Plus or minus. Okay, now that on this side over here, x plus 2 squared, square root, just becomes x plus 2. And this is equal to plus or minus square root of 14. Okay, the factors of 14 are 1 and 14 and 2 and 7. None of those are perfect squares, so we're going to leave that as square root of 14. And then this equation becomes x is equal to, okay, we're going to move this positive 2 to the other side, so we have to subtract 2 from both sides. So then we get minus 2, this is our subtracting 2, and then plus or minus square root of 14. Okay, that is our answer. You can also write it like this: x is equal to negative 2 plus square root of 14, or x is equal to negative 2 minus square root of 14. Okay, either one works. Okay, let's move on to another example. Okay, in this example, you will notice that the coefficient of x squared is 3. It's a little bit different than the previous example where the coefficient was 1. Okay, so what that means is we have to take an extra step by finding the greatest common factor. Okay, if we take a look, the greatest common factor between this term, and that term is 3. So we're going to take that out, and we're going to rewrite this as x squared plus 2x minus 3 is equal to 0. Okay, now to move this 3 over to this side, we have to divide both sides by 3. Okay, and in this case, I'm going to write this out because I want to show you what happens. If we divide this by 3, we have to divide this by 3. And when we do that, these 3's cancel out, right? Because 3 over 3 is 1. So then we're left with x squared plus 2x minus 3 equals, take a look at this, 0 over 3 is just 0. Okay, now we can use the completing the square method, and the first thing we need to do is move this negative 3 over to this side. Okay, the reason we're going to move this is because I can't find factors of negative 3 when added together gives me a positive 2. Actually, let me restate that. I can find factors of negative 3 that when added together give me a positive 2. Okay, but we're not going to, in a normal situation, when you're asked to factor this, okay, quadratic, the first thing you would say is to determine whether or not factors of negative 3 when added together give you a 2. Okay, in this case they can, because we get x plus 3 times x minus 1 is equal to 0, and we find that x is equal to negative 3 or x is equal to 1. Okay, but for purposes of this particular technique, we're not going to go down that path. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is move this negative 3 over to this side, and we get x squared plus 2x is equal to 3. Okay, so in using the completing the square method, okay, we're going to take this middle term, which is 2, and we're going to divide that by 2, and we get 1. Okay, then we're going to take the result of that, which is 1, and we're going to square it, and we still get 1. So rewriting this equation, we get x squared plus 2x plus 1 is equal to, and we have to do the same thing to the other side of the equation, 3 plus 1. Okay, simplifying this, we get x plus 1 times x plus 1, right, when we factor it, and this side is equal to 4. Okay, this then becomes x plus 1 quantity squared. That is equal to 4. And continuing on with the completing the square method, we square root both sides, and we get x plus 1 is equal to plus or minus 2, right? Because the square root of 4 is plus or minus 2. Okay? So now we're going to rewrite this equation to x. Actually, before we even do that, let's go ahead and simplify this first. Okay, so we get, we're going to move the positive 1 over to this side, and to do that we subtract 1 from both sides, and we get x is equal to negative 1 plus or minus 2. Okay, so after you do that, let's move this up here. X is equal to negative 1 plus or minus 2. Okay, now we're going to split this into 2. Okay, this becomes x is equal to negative 1 plus 2, or x is equal to negative 1 minus 2. Now we're going to solve for x on each side. X is then equal to 1, or x is equal to negative 3. And that becomes our answer. Okay, I hope that wasn't too confusing. If any of this threw you off, or if it wasn't clear, please go back to the beginning of the recording and listen to this again. Thank you.